I grew up never knowing my mother's real name. On my birth certificate, the parents section was left blank. My mother always said, "That's not important, as long as you know I love you." And I believed her until she passed away, taking every secret with her. My mother was a mysterious woman. She never spoke of her past. No close friends, no family visited us. Not a single old photograph hung on our walls. Every time I asked about my father, she just smiled sadly and said, "No one is more important than me, sweetheart." I used to believe her. I thought maybe something painful had happened that she didn't want to remember. But as I grew older, I began to feel afraid. Afraid that something was very wrong about my life, a piece of truth buried too deep. Then one day, while clearing out her small apartment after the funeral, I found a paper tucked inside an old book, my original birth certificate. But in the space marked mother's full name, the name written there wasn't the one my mother had used her entire life. At first I thought it was a mistake. But then I found more documents, a few old photographs, and a letter she never slashed the letter. Sent. One by one, they pulled me into a story I never expected, a story of who my mother really was. Or more precisely, a journey to rediscover the woman who raised me with love. Under a name that wasn't truly hers. The name on the birth certificate read, Grace Leonard. But the woman I had known all my life was Claire Adams. The handwriting was elegant, almost delicate. I ran my fingers over the ink as if touching it would somehow explain the truth. For a long time, I just sat there in the corner of her apartment. The musty smell of old books and dried flowers surrounding me. I didn't cry. My mind was spinning too fast. Who was Grace Leonard? Why had my mother Claire never told me this was her real name? I pulled out the box I had found in the back of her closet. It was small and dusty, tied shut with a faded blue ribbon. Inside were old letters, a broken locket, and a handful of photographs I had never seen before. There she was, my mother, but younger, with longer hair and a brighter smile. She stood beside a woman who looked older, maybe in her 60s, with silver curls and warm eyes. They were sitting on a porch, laughing. On the back of the photo, in faded pencil, it said, Grace and Mom, 1986. That was the first time I had ever seen my mother referred to as Grace, and that was also the first time I had seen her with her own mother. I picked up a letter from the box. The envelope was never sealed. Inside was a note, addressed simply to my daughter if she ever finds her way back. The letter read, Dear Grace, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're alive or if you're still using that name you ran off with, but I forgive you. I always have. I just want to know you're safe. You and the little girl. If you ever see this, please come home. I kept the porch light on every night for the first 3 years. Then I started to dim it, thinking maybe I should let you go, but deep down I couldn't. You're my daughter. That will never change. I sat still for a long time, staring at that letter. Little girl. That was me. She had run away. My mother had run away from someone or something long before I was old enough to remember. And she had changed her name. Claire Adams was a name. She had invented a name to start over. But why? What was she running from? I looked at the postmark on the envelope, Ashwell, Illinois. I had never heard of the town before. But the address was still there, written clearly on the envelope. There was even a phone number scribbled on the side, next to the words, Don't call unless it's safe. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I booked a bus ticket to Ashwell. I didn't know who I would meet. I didn't even know if the address was still valid. But I had to find out who my mother really was. And maybe, just maybe, meet the people she had left behind. Ashwell was one of those towns that felt frozen in time. There were no tall buildings, no busy streets. It's just rows of old brick homes, faded storefronts, and a gas station that still used manual pumps. It was quiet. It's too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you feel like everyone knew you didn't belong. I stepped off the bus with nothing but a backpack, my mother's photo, and the envelope with the return address. I had memorized the house number, 314 Maple Street. It was only a few blocks from the bus stop. As I walked, I noticed how people looked at me not suspiciously, but curiously, like they were trying to place me, as if my face stirred some distant memory. Maybe I did look like her, Grace Leonard. When I finally stood in front of the house, I froze. It was small but well kept, with a white porch and a wooden swing that creaked gently in the summer wind. There was a single porch light hanging beside the door. I stared at it for a long time. Had it really stayed on for years? I hesitated, then knocked. No answer. I was about to turn away when the door opened. A woman stood there, maybe in her 70s, wearing a floral apron. Her gray hair was pulled back into a bun, and her hands trembled slightly as she held the door open. Her eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other, and then she whispered, barely audible, "Grace." I shook my head quickly, tears stinging my eyes. "No, I'm Lily. I'm her daughter." The woman's hand flew to her mouth. She stepped back, letting the screen door swing open. "My God," she breathed. "You look just like her." Her name was Martha Leonard, my grandmother. She invited me inside, and I sat down at a dining table that looked like it. Hadn't changed since the 80s. Family pictures lined the walls. Most were black and white, but one in color caught my eye. A young woman in a blue graduation gown. "Grace, I always hoped you'd find your way here," Martha said, pouring tea into mismatched china cups, even if she never did. I told her everything, how my mother had passed, how I found the certificate, the box, the letter, how she had never spoken of this place or of her real name. Martha listened, her eyes filling with tears. "She was only 17 when she left," she said. "Ran off with an older man. We tried to stop her, but she was stubborn, fiercely independent. She said she didn't need anyone. When she got pregnant, he abandoned her. She never came back." My throat tightened. She never said a word, not once. She never talked about family at all. Martha nodded sadly. She was ashamed. I think she thought we wouldn't take her back. I stared at the old photo again. The woman beside Grace had to be Martha. "She loved me," I whispered. "She did everything for me. I wish she had told me who she really was." Martha reached across the table, gently taking my hand. "She was protecting you in the only way she knew how. But she shouldn't have carried it all alone." That afternoon, Martha took out a box of her own full of letters never sent, photos never shared. There were baby pictures of me I had never seen, taken from a distance, probably by someone hired to keep tabs. My grandmother had never stopped watching, never stopped hoping. "I used to drive out to the city every Christmas," she said. "I'd park a block from your apartment just to see you playing in the yard." She didn't know. I didn't want to scare her, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had no idea I was loved this much. From so far away, I stayed in Ashwell for 2 days. We talked, laughed, cried. She told me stories of my mother as a child, the way she used to hide under the table during storms. How she once tried to build a treehouse out of shoeboxes and duct tape. "I lost her twice," Martha said, "on my last day. Once when she ran away, and once when she passed. But I got you back." Before I left, I asked her something that had been on my mind since I arrived. Why did she change her name? Martha looked out the window for a long moment. Grace felt like she had failed everyone. She thought becoming Claire Adams was her second chance. A new life with no strings. No shame. And it was. But it was also a life built on silence. I returned home from Ashwell with more than just answers. I returned with a sense of peace. But peace can be complicated. It doesn't erase the questions you didn't get to ask or the apologies you'll never hear. It just gives them a quieter place to live inside you. I began digging through more of my mother's belongings. Not for secrets anymore, but for memories. I wanted to understand how she loved, how she grieved, how she forgave, and if she never spoke those things out loud. One night I opened a drawer in her study and found a notebook. It was old and leather-bound with the initials GL stamped in the corner. Inside were pages of poetry. Some were dated decades ago. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, but the words were someone else's, someone raw, aching, hopeful, Grace. One poem caught my breath. I am the name I left behind. The echo no one's meant to find, but still I write in secret lines, a hope that someday love rewinds. She had written as Grace. She hadn't forgotten. Every day I pieced together more of her private world. Grocery lists written in the margins of books. Notes to herself tucked into drawers. Even a recording I found on an old cassette, her voice reading bedtime stories. Probably for me when I was too young to remember. And then came the day I decided to go back to Ashwell. This time it wasn't to ask questions. It was to give something back. I brought the notebook, the photos, the poems. I brought the story of her life that she never got to finish writing. And I brought her ashes. Martha met me at the porch, her eyes shining with both sorrow and something close to joy. You came back, she whispered. I think she would have wanted this. I said, holding the urn close. We held a small ceremony in the backyard under the old oak tree that Grace used to climb as a girl. The same tree where she had carved. Her name, GL. 1982, still faintly visible on the bark. Martha and I took turns reading poems from the notebook. Then we scattered her ashes in the wind right where she had once laughed, once cried. Once dreamed of becoming someone new, and for the first time, felt like she had finally come home. After the ceremony, we sat on the porch swing for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Martha handed me an old photo album that I hadn't seen before. Inside were more pieces of Gray's birthday cards she had made as a child, report cards, even a letter she once wrote to Santa asking for a telescope, a bike, and for my mom to stop crying. She always wanted to understand the stars. Martha said, smiling softly. She believed they were full of answers. I looked up at the sky that night, clearer than I'd ever seen it in the city, and I thought maybe she was right. Maybe some people become stars when they leave. Not the kind that burn out, but the kind that guide you, slowly, silently. Home. Back in my apartment. Life moved on. It always does. But something had shifted inside me. I no longer saw my mother as a mystery-sealed shut-eye. Saw her as a mosaic of choices, sacrifices, and untold stories. She wasn't just Claire Adams. She was Grace Leonard. Both names were hers. Both lives were real. I legally changed my last name, not to erase who she became, but to honor who she had been. Lily Leonard. It felt right, like opening a window that had always been painted shut. My friends asked why. Some didn't understand, but others did. They saw the way I carried myself differently now, like I was standing a little taller, breathing a little deeper. Like I had finally come into something that had been waiting for me. I kept in touch with Martha. We called every Sunday. She became my window into Grace's past, but also my mirror in the present. She'd send me recipes, little newspaper clippings, even her own poetry, sometimes her words rhyming and stumbling just like her daughters had once done. There was love in every envelope. One day I asked her, "Do you ever think she regretted it? Leaving, changing her name, never coming back." She paused, then said something I'll never forget. I think she regretted the silence more than the choices. Grace wanted to be forgiven, but sometimes when you carry guilt for too long, it turns into distance. And distance is hard to close. When you believe you don't deserve the bridge, that stayed with me. Regret doesn't mean shame. Sometimes it's just love that waited too long to be said aloud. One rainy morning, I went to the attic and opened the last sealed box in my mother's closet. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I thought it might be jewelry. But inside was a locket worn, slightly tarnished, but still delicate. When I opened it, I gasped. One side held a photo of me as a baby, the other, a photo of her. And between the two faces engraved in the thin gold frame were the words, "I never left you." Not really. I clutched it to my chest and cried for everything I had lost, for everything I had found. Maybe we never truly know our parents. Not entirely. But sometimes, if we listen closely to the silence, to the fragments, to the things they never said, we can still hear them, still feel them, and sometimes that's enough. If you made it this far, thank you truly. This wasn't just a story about a name. It was about memory, identity, regret, and the quiet, powerful grace of reconciliation, even when it comes too late to say out loud. Maybe you, too, carry a question you've never asked your parents. Maybe there's a name, a letter, a truth buried in your family that no one dares to speak. And maybe it's time. So here's what we'd love for you to do. First, this story moved you. Take a moment to share it. Someone out there might be holding on to a hidden part of their past. Maybe this is the nudge they need to open a drawer, pick up the phone, or forgive themselves. Second, tell us your story. Drop a comment below. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you love? You ever found peace with a painful truth? We read every word, Dan. This channel exists because of people like you. Third, if you haven't already, subscribe to Real Moments. We tell stories that matter, real, raw, and human. Stories that might not make headlines, but make hearts pause, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the loudest. They're the quiet ones, whispered across generations, hidden in boxes, carved into old trees, like Grace's story, like yours, Dot. So let's keep remembering together. Subscribe, like, comment, share with someone who needs this today. We'll see you in the next story.